Hi, everyone. Welcome to Diverse by Design, expanding inspiration and amplifying diverse voices. My name is Katy Olson. I am editor of AD Pro. AD Pro is Architectural Digest community for interior designers and other members of the trade like you all who are on the call joining us today. First of all, I want to thank our incredible partners at Crate and Barrel and CB2. This program is the first of a three-part series between AD Pro, Crate and Barrel, and CB2's trade program. We are all really incredibly excited for this conversation today, and we are really glad that you're joining us. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists. So we're going to bring them on. So first, we have Samara. Samara Chukbed is Vice President of Merchandising at Crate and Barrel. She's also Chairman of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. With over 17 years of merchant and marketing experience, she has a blended multi-channel background in physical, brick and mortar, retail, and digital. At Crate and Barrel, she leads the overall strategy and tactical execution related to all aspects of customer-centric product assortment, pricing, and P&L management for the brand across in-store and online channels. Also on the call today is Andrea. We've practiced that. I'm from New York, so I'm mutilating names. Andrea Ehrman is the Divisional Merchandise Manager at CB2. She began her career in stores and then moved to the corporate team, starting with Crate and Barrel 25 years ago and joining CB2 as a merchant in 2012. As a trend-forward contributor, she has spent her time building up the accessories and textile business to meet the elevated and curated needs of both the brand and the customer, with a focus on a modern aesthetic and attention to quality and design-forward production. And we also have on our call joining us today, Kia McSwain. Kia is the principal designer of Kimberly and Cameron Interiors, and she's also the president of the Black Interior Designers Network. Kia has a self-taught, well-trained eye for quality art, furnishings, and textiles, and she thrives off of awakening creative magic within herself. In 2017, she became president of the BIDN, the Black Interior Designers Network, which is a nationwide network for designers of color. Through the BIDN, Kia works on establishing strategic partnerships with industry leaders, all with the goal of simplifying the transitional period for new interior designers of color and ensuring that there is consistent representation and inclusion within the industry. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for being here today. We have a lot of folks on the call today. We're going to jump right in. Excuse me. The weather is changing, so my voice is a little dry. So let's get right into it. This year has been tumultuous, to say the least. It's been a year that has revealed the many inequities in both our society, but also within our industry. And so we could spend days discussing the problems that are unique to our industry and still not cover what really needs to be addressed. But today, we'd really like to focus on the actionable ways the different members of our community can really make an impact. So in our case, it's corporations, and it's also members of the trade. So we're going to talk today about amplifying diverse voices, expanding our inspiration, and above all, making the industry a little bit more equitable, welcoming, and prosperous for everybody. So why don't we start with a glance through the corporate lens? So Crate and Barrel and CB2. Why don't you gals walk us through CB2 and Crate and Barrel's initial response to the Black Lives Matter movement of earlier this year? So maybe you can share some of the challenges that you identified, how you began to address them, and what were some of the questions that you began asking internally? Samira, why don't you start us off?
Sure, and thank you so much for having us. I know it's really important for us to be here and create this dialogue, so excited for the discussion ahead. But as we look back at the most recent events and the reason why we're partially gathered here today, one of Crate's core values is that we invite everyone. You know, we set the table and leave a seat for all. And when we had to evaluate after George Floyd's death and the events that followed, how were we going to show up in this moment? Who did we want to be? How did we want to create and drive change and action, not only for our associates, but for our customers and the community? And so we really had to start to take stock of, are we listening enough? Are we learning enough? Are we asking the right proactive conversations? And really recognizing that this is not easy. You are stepping into uncomfortable conversations, and we needed to be very okay with that and give our associate bases resources and tools to be able to transfer those conversations all throughout our entire organization. And as a result, we stood up our DE&I Council and really wanted to hone in as to both short-term and long-term goals. Where could we drive immediate impact? Where could we leverage our platform to create amplification? And there were low-hanging fruit that we could take advantage of and put some measurable goals and actions to create some immediate change. And then from a longer-term visioning, we wanted to make sure that we were, one, being a part of this conversation, not overestimating that we know what the solves would exactly be, but we wanted to make sure that we're participating in a way that can be authentic and that we can go back and continue to build out our future roadmap, because this is not a one-time shot. This is about us putting in a sustainable and scalable program to drive consistent change as a part of our culture and values.
And I also wanted to echo Samira's comments about thanking you to bring us to this conversation. I think the past several months really had us take stock of the role we have as home furnishing retailers. You know, we source inspiration for all things home, and it's probably the most personal space for each and every one of us, and it's really shaped by the cultural influences around all of us. And we're not only retailers, we're culture makers, and you know, we're in a situation where we highlight the elements of inspiration and design, but it's our job to translate what that means into beauty in your personal space. But with that comes amazing responsibility to make sure that the people, our customers, see themselves in the spaces that we really hold up as beautiful and inspiring. That being said, you know, this situation forced us more closely to look at our responsibility that we have as a company to be diverse and inclusive when we curate inspiration and how we approach new partnerships. I think, you know, if we're setting a trend and sharing what inspires us, we need to start asking really tough questions. Are we being inclusive enough of the vision that we're putting forth and who we're inspiring? Where are we pulling that inspiration from? And if there's any bias on a trend or any influence of our own culture and race, those are questions that we need to be asking ourselves. You know, part of inspiration is kind of continuing to elevate and amplify and discover new voices. And we've really had to ask hard questions in our personal process of where design comes from. I think a lot of us consider great design as coming from Eurocentric influences. You know, a lot of us here in what we do every day, we look to iconic designs from Italy and France and the Netherlands. We talk about Jean Prouvé, Pierre Jeanneret, we talk about Cernan, Gabriella Crespi, Brancusi, and the list goes on and on. But what are we doing to widen our lens and address a different perspective? You know, at the end of the day, we're really setting the standard for great design, all of us on this call and this panel, and it's up to us to kind of be responsible for showcasing the cultural richness of our world and celebrating all the designs. I think the other part is, you know, with Crate & Barrel and CB2, we have a huge global lens. We've done an amazing job. We're proud of the fact that we bring product in from 42 countries. And I've had the pleasure of traveling to many of those countries and working with those vendors and factories and craft makers. And really, though, it's about bringing that inspiration and that global perspective back to our backyard and back here to the US, and focusing on our reach and how we can find the inspiration and representation for Black artists, designers, and creators here in the US that are really pivotal in changing our culture today and pivotal in driving what is beautiful product.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned Eurocentric design. We're going to get into that later on in our chat for sure, but it's such an interesting topic and one we're going to dive in deep. For the designer's perspective, from you, Kia. So Kia, you're president, obviously, of the Black Interior Designers Network. You're also principal of Kimberly and Cameron Interiors. You inherited both the legacy of the design firm and also the network from your mentor, Kimberly Ward. I would imagine that your work until this point has really prepared you for the challenges that we're now experiencing in the midst of the civil rights movement, this human rights movement, really. I'm wondering if you can share with us one or two examples around how your day-to-day as a designer and also as your day-to-day as president of the network have changed in the wake of this movement? Like, what has changed for you professionally over these last few months?
Well, I'd like to start by saying thank you, Katy. Thank you to AD Pro. Thank you to Crate & Barrel, the CV2 family. We're grateful to be a part of this conversation and share a little bit or a lot based on, what I've experienced, what, some of my colleagues have experienced, and just how to make a difference. Well, we know that the Black Interior Designers Network is a decade old. So this is not new to us. The experiences of other designers being within the industry and being held back or not really being open to partnerships or resources is not new to us. I would say after George Floyd's death and Breonna Taylor's death, their murders, we began to consistently and more so actively see a lot of companies that were reaching out to us, and rather us having to reach out to them to partner. They began reaching out on a daily basis, and these companies were emailing and asking about how they could get involved, how they could partner, how they could help us make a change within the industry. And that wasn't the norm 6 months ago. 6 months ago, people may have known we existed, they may not have, but they were not looking to invest into the Black interior design community. So it's challenging for me to aim for high hopes, although I wonder, how long this is going to last. I do have a mild skepticism, and I reiterate, I have high hopes, but I don't want to see this as just a passing wave, but I fear it's already become that.
In terms of your design business, how has it been sourcing product? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that process, how the day-to-day design business has changed over the last few months. Has there been more talent that you're experiencing and being introduced to?
Absolutely. There's more talent I'm being introduced to. There's more artisans, artists, there are consumers, clients that I'm being introduced to from all aspects, all walks of life. And they are really wanting to pour into our resources. And for me, that's the main goal. I'm taking this time now to focus on finding those new resources within our Black community to use in my projects, to share with other designers that they may be able to use in their projects. For me, it's a joy to find Black creative that's making incredible products, and in turn finding clients who value those resources and they want it in their homes, and they don't just see it as a thing, but they see that Black art as something beautiful that they can pass down, right? That will be grand for them to have in the home. And so I enjoy that part. I enjoy, in terms of current projects, my clients have really taken me across the U.S. I'm currently designing in Boston, New York, New Orleans, Atlanta. I'm based here in Denver. So it's been a wild ride. I try to stay focused. I try to stay active. I try to stay of service for my people. And even through this pandemic, the love I have for them, the industry, and my clients is unconditional.
Speaking of product and sourcing, Samara, in your role as VP of Merchandising at Crate & Barrel, one of your goals is creating customer journeys that intersect with product. So how has that directive or that goal changed over the last few months, given the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, I think I really want to take a moment because I want to address, and I hear Kaya's skepticism about, we really don't want this discussion or narrative to be driven by what's just happening in the news, right? So, the way in which we believe that you create long-lasting change is about making these measures and goals tied to your executive team, and being much more thoughtful and intentional about how we source and where we source. Andrea's right. We are a global brand. We know global artists and makers. And I think that the priority for ourselves is making connections like these, and with outreach and community and creating this type of dialogue, we have more of those artisans and makers much closer to home than maybe we would have originally challenged ourselves to go find and make connection with. So I think part of the opportunity in this future state is this type of discussion and dialogue has to also become sustainable and scalable so that access and introductions can become much more a part of those connection points that maybe did not exist as easily in the past.
Absolutely. I'm wondering too, maybe have you taken an assessment of how you're leveraging the platform that you all have? It sounds like you have, that over this time, it's been a call to look at what's been done so far and what's happening in the future. And I know, Andrea, in your role, again, you're divisional merchandise manager for CB2. Mentorship plays a part in that, right? That cultivation of talent. So I'm wondering how this increased focus on and the commitment to diversity that Samara is speaking about, how does that impact your work on a daily basis and also on a long-term basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think, professionally, my role here at CB2 is really determining who, where, and how we design and source for these categories. And, it's about making those deliberate choices for representation where we can find the right authentic places to elevate Black vendors, artisans, and designers. And honestly, it's been a lot harder than I feel like it should be. And I think that's because we haven't created a platform, or we haven't had access to a platform like this. So I think this conversation really brings that to the forefront. And, I think the things that I talk about with my team on a regular basis is how we change it, where we're looking, and my role as a mentor leading a merchandising team is to make sure we're promoting that inclusivity and change. And whether it's amplifying, advocating, or championing the voices, I'm much more aware of my impact and the decisions we make. It's beyond the product design at this point. It's about those relationships that we're creating. And, sometimes I think personal experiences can inform professional choices. And, I'm a voracious product person. I live and breathe product every day, and I am constantly shopping. And there are times, recently where I found product from, like in this recently, a Black ceramicist that I follow who I love. And I really wanted to bring her mugs into my home because coffee is important to me and her mugs were beautiful. And I placed an order and, there was an extended time. I think I waited 5 months for my mugs, and I was patient. And part of the conversation I saw happening on social media was people were getting frustrated that they were waiting and waiting. And I felt I needed to understand that this ceramicist was inundated, to what Kia said earlier, inundated with requests early on. Black Lives Matter movement, everybody wanted to support, and that's a great thing. But then they hit a moment where they got frustrated because the product wasn't as quick as something that we might have on our shelves in our stores, right? So I think, my role in that was advocating to say, it's worth the wait. I want to support her and I want to encourage her process. But that translates to my professional role in seeing how I can find a way to help those new vendors, or, what can I do to help inform or mentor them with their infrastructure or production planning, to make it more successful and sustainable for her and other designers and artists like her.
Absolutely. And I think you used the word ally, and allyship has been a conversation we've been having. I know at AD Pro, we're hearing it in the media. Part of BIDN's response to the events of the last few months was a newly launched allyship program. So designed for non-Black members of the community, non-Black designers. And part of the call to action, there were a number of calls to action. Maybe people on this call, maybe our attendees have seen it. We wrote about it on ED. Obviously, the BIDN has promoted it. One of those calls to action was asking designers to rethink the Eurocentric standard for design. So we mentioned that earlier on in this call. And Kia, I'm wondering if you can share with us maybe 1 or 2 concrete examples of this standard. And also, how can the non-Black designer, the non-Black member of this industry, question this standard in their work from an aesthetic standpoint? I think part of it probably means, how do you embrace non-Eurocentric design without appropriating the work of Black designers? So maybe you have 1 or 2 examples you can share with us of that.
That's a great question. You can't, you cannot say Eurocentric design is the blueprint while appropriating African design. We oftentimes hear, examples being made about, Falameki stools, for example. People often use Falameki stools as, drink tables, end tables, stool seating, but these are traditional tribal ceremonial stools, that chiefs, sit on. People need to really do their research and research the history of the pieces that they're using and not just see it as an additional piece to a room that they're pulling together. I ask that, these companies and these vendors stop dubbing these pieces worldly or exotic and call them what they are. They are African prints, they are African pieces, they are African stools, they are African hats. There is an origin and a history, to everything. And, it is a company's duty to do their research, it needs to be done ethically, and when you invest in these companies and with these vendors that you partner with, you want to understand, in any way you can. You find that not only is it beneficial to you to know and understand, but the client wants to know where their pieces originate from as well. They want to know history and how can I present you this innovative piece of art, that comes from the motherland or wherever, and I know nothing about it, right? So we find that this is really a moment where non-Black designers really need to do their research, and you find appropriation, that just is what it is, but give credit. Give credit where credit is due. And for me, that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, getting educated. And you mentioned the responsibility of these companies, of vendors. And for home and CB2, I was so impressed with these numbers. So upwards of 100 million visitors to the websites every year, nearly 3 million followers across a number of digital channels, print material that reaches 35 million people. I know because I'm a subscriber. Obviously email, and then 25 million visitors in your stores each year. So that responsibility that Kia's mentioning, that influence, I would ask you to, how do you leverage that influence? How do you advertise, who you partner with, what you communicate? We have to acknowledge that shapes how people view home, right? When you have that kind of power, that kind of influence, how do you use that? And how do you feel about that responsibility? I would ask that of Samara first. How do you leverage that influence?
I think you said it so great. I mean, it is a responsibility and a power to influence how people are seen and seeing how we see them. I'd say there's both long-term and short-term goals for mobilizing and creating impact. I'd say more importantly in the short term, an area that we were proud of, 37% of our influencer base is BIPOC, but we said, we can make that better. Let's goal ourselves to get that to 50% representation by 2022. When we look at how we represent individuals in our advertising, in our media spend, where does the Crate and Barrel brand show up as far as reach? There's a lot more runway that we had that we were not necessarily leveraging in the past. And again, making this accountable to goals within our leadership group so that we get that cross-functional embrace of change. Part of a D&I council's role is to be there to help, yes, shape the foundation, but you really need your organization to embrace it and own it. This is not just one person's job. So we feel that accountability going out across our broader leadership team is what really helps to create momentous change.
Absolutely. And I believe you're also embarking on some influencer partnerships. wondering if we can hear more about that. There's also the Our Feeds We Love campaign.
Yeah. So I think a combination of, as we go to just evaluate who do we partner with, always using that as an opportunity. Do we have enough representation? And the Feeds We Love campaign was just another way in which we could use our social platforms to bring light and visibility to artists, designers, hear their stories, hear their approaches, and help our audiences follow them, support them, and in a way that maybe they wouldn't have naturally bumped into them. We love it, and have always been fans of these designers. And so this was just a very easy way that we could step into this space, but create a lot of strong goodwill with this community.
Absolutely. And I know the brand has made great strides so far, in expanding the diversity of the vendor representation, specifically broadening its scope when searching out inspiration. And I think most notably for what we're discussing today, committing to a goal of increasing product representation by Black designers and collaborators by the year 2024 to 15%. Right?
We are.
So that's it's wonderful. I mean, it's a number that better reflects the general population of this country. And I believe you're also planning to increase representation among Black associates in your stores and also in the corporate realm, both by 40% by 2024. That's fairly impressive, right? So how are you identifying new partners, and how, maybe you can walk us through that plan a little bit?
So I think that it is a combination of the process of how the industry makes connection is one where forums like these are really critical, because there isn't necessarily an easy path for everyone to show up at every trade show, or to expect that a new up-and-coming designer has the means to show up in some of these traditional larger forums. So the ways in which we can make it much more grassroots, social, make ourselves available to make that connection and introduction, I think goes a long way. The other important component is we wanted to look at this not just about the intersection of product, because yes, we will merchandise, we will assort, we will bring visibility and awareness to celebrate designers that we want to work with. But we need to talk about, do we look like our communities that we show up in from a talent standpoint? Are we, from a corporate standpoint, looking at hiring into BIPOC into our leadership levels? Part of how you create change is who also sits around the table, and we want to foster that. And then lastly, focused in around our brand experience, which has always been very global in nature, but has room to also improve to be inclusive right from our own backyard.
Speaking of that, again, we come back to that term Eurocentric design standard. For your point, Andrea, we talked about how narrow that is, and also that we have this desire to broaden representation among Black artisans, Black artists, Black designers who are local, who are here in this country when it comes to product. For you, where does that start?
I mean, I think at the core of it, it's really redefining what is considered great design and beautiful design in a new standard. And I think, it's really about leveraging those contrasts of balance and viewpoints. I think we need to change the encyclopedia of design a bit and really bring into the conversation more of a perspective. We can still see the beauty in a Giaponti lounge chair, of course, but there's more space for others to kind of exist and talk about that beautiful design. CB2 at its heart, we've always been a city-minded brand based in urban culture, and it's really a part of our DNA. And we can't disregard, or we have to be excited about the influence that Black culture has in our American culture at large. It's a very rich culture, whether it's art, fashion, music, design. It's always been at the heart of CB2's DNA about driving our brand messaging and our market positioning. I think since I joined CB2, we've always looked to fashion designers, Tracy Reese, Yeezy, when Olivier Rostique joined Balmain, that became so important to driving our brand forward. And we need to kind of find more opportunities to elevate and amplify those inspirational moments and those inspirational designs and ideas. Mm-hmm. And we really need to do a better job sourcing design and products from Black designers and artists. That's part of our huge responsibility as the reach of our brands are immense. And, like Samira said, networking is a huge part of this to find talent and new partners. And I think there's informal and formal networks that we need to really plug into. And it really starts with coming to the table and being welcoming and creating a sense of belonging for those artists and designers to step up to the table and join the conversation. And we really need to kind of take an actionable step to close the gaps that we see between the designs out there and what we're bringing to the table.
Yeah, I think one way designers can contribute to that, right? Because that's the corporate perspective, that's the producing side. As a designer, designers vote with their dollars, right? So Kia, when you're sourcing materials or product, how do you do that? What's your process like when you're trying to be representative and inclusive and to vote with your dollar and your clients' dollars? Because that's a change-making activity.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's rare that I say it, but I think I can speak for all Black designers when I say we want to spend our money where we're appreciated. For me, I start my projects out by looking at what my clients use and need for their home first and foremost. From that point, I begin to look into my network of artists, artisans, manufacturers, people that have supported the Black Interior Designers Network or myself, prior to the murders that have happened this year, prior to a lot of people, doing their job, and trying to partner, prior to people who really want to see change, right? I don't knowingly source from any vendors who don't invest in my community. There's a process to building my projects up. I begin with those questions for myself, what do I know about what the client needs that I can plug in really quickly? What artists do I know that works in a medium that'll resonate with this particular client? What artisans do I know that work in a craft that might resonate, with this particular client? So I'm really pulling out all the stops to see what I can bring to the table to support my community, as well as bringing a fully functional and amazing space to my clients. After I ask myself all of these questions, I curate a mixture of products that I know are going to be a good representation of who I truly am and truly advancing my cause and our cause in supporting the Black design community.
I think it's wonderful. We're talking about being intentional, both while shopping, while searching for makers. It's certainly a worthy goal. I think we also, any conversation about this would be incomplete if we did not acknowledge that there are systemic barriers that have hindered entry for these small artisans, for makers, for designers, of people of color, right, who are in those practices. So some examples that we're familiar with: not having the means to exhibit at a trade show, not having enough upfront inventory, which is, we were hearing about the ceramicist earlier and the 5-month wait time. Not having the capital to undergo what amounts to really rigorous vendor testing, which is a requirement. And, the list goes on and on. So Andrea and Samira, I'm wondering how you and the company are either adapting or reconsidering, reevaluating these different barriers, and particularly how they relate to designers and artisans of color.
I'd say that there are a few really great components in that, and that is us getting much more creative in how we foster opportunity for others. There are two components of one. How do you create opportunity, whether that be internships, working with design schools and talent that maybe we wouldn't have naturally had a relationship with. So also changing, where do we somewhat recruit out from? And then the other is leveraging our network, right? Leveraging our manufacturing base to put artists with manufacturer to unlock better capabilities can definitely be a fast track to having that artist or new product designer trying to solve all those steps on their own, because I think that could feel very overwhelming. But that really can be our responsibility in helping push product design forward, innovation forward, and celebrating a new working model, and looking through terms and conditions in a way that are a little bit more flexible as we test into ideas and bring product to light for the first time.
And I would add to that, I mean, I think that with Creighton CB2 that, you know, we work with thousands of vendors and designers designing tens of thousands of SKUs. And, you know, we have a responsibility to our customer to always deliver great quality that's safe and on time to our customers. But, you know, I think part of being an ally in this situation and really opening the doors and welcoming people to the table means that we need to kind of relook at how we start that conversation with our partners. I think, you know, someone might be excited to work with us and their first entry into the brands is this extensive vendor operations guide that can feel very overwhelming, very challenging. And how are we mentoring a partner through that process or advocating for, you know, things that might help them be more successful in the long term? Or do we need to look at how we're paying vendors or partners and designers in a different flow to kind of allow for financial security with that partner? I think the other part of that is, you know, part of this conversation is we have a legal contract between vendors, designers, and us, but we need to create an environment where it's safe to ask questions, to offer advice, and really build that kind of bridge to new partners that we really believe in, that are authentic, that we want to have long-standing partnerships. You know, I think that's at the core of Crate and Barrel and CB2 are these relationships that aren't just a flash in the pan. You know, they are consistent over decades, and that's really important. It doesn't start overnight, but it also is built off of a trust that means that we're open and advocating for our partners. And really, you know, I think it is a situation where we can't deny there's systemic racism in the world we live in right now, but we need to kind of think differently and step into it in a different way and really be open to that.
Yeah, you know, we haven't used these words too much yet, but it's really what we're talking about is education and mentorship and relationships, right? Cultivating those things. And all three of you have experienced and or facilitated mentorship throughout your careers. I know, Samaria, in our offline conversations, you've posed this question, which I thought, two questions actually. One, how do we make sure that Black men and women see themselves as designers? And two, how do we reach them at a point where they are deciding upon and shaping their careers? So I've heard you talk about an organization that Crate and Barrel partners with. It's called My Block, My Hood, My City. And I'm wondering if you can walk us through how do relationships like these, like this one, how does that help Crate reach these future Black designers at that point that you're talking about? How do we help designers of color see themselves as designers?
Yeah, I mean, we love our work with My Block, My Hood, My City. And I think that what I appreciate most about them really, which is just this mantra of you can't be what you don't see. And so not to say that all of these kids will come out and become designers, but the fact is, are there career types, industry types that they may not have exposure to and they can connect with, learn from, get inspired by, and then make a future life decision or an interest or want to skill build into something that maybe they thought was unreachable or I had never thought to experience that before. And so by partnering with them, we want to help show this youth, this side of our lives, this side of retail, this side of design and product, to show that we're here. And, you know, I can be a testament to, you might not have expected to see me on the other side of that conversation. But again, about making connection and community and saying, yes, you can.
Mm-hmm. And from a designer's perspective, Kia, I'm wondering what are some of the ways non-Black designers can align with the BIDN's goals? And how does mentorship play a role in that goal?
That's a great question. I'm just thinking about what Samara said. Marian Wright Edelman, you can't be what you can't see. That's one of my favorite quotes. It plays a tremendous role. It is imperative that we be a representation, be there for the future, you know, in all aspects. So following George
Ahmaud, Brianna, Elijah, and so many others murders this year. You know, the subsequent social justice protests that are still taking place across the country. We decided that we wanted to launch BIDN allyship campaign, right? So we're going to launch this program across our non-Black counterparts involved in our fight for equity within the design industry. You know, and a lot of these people have been fighting along with us. You know, some people are new to the fight. The program includes a monthly monetary contribution that helps us advance the network's goals, and further programming, and beyond that, it's really just a commitment to have the uncomfortable conversations that people really don't want to have. You know, you've got to challenge the status quo. You've got to ask yourself these hard questions, rethink the way you've traditionally viewed aspects of your everyday lives, of design, that whole Eurocentric thing, you know, wanting to explore everywhere else in the world, but right there at your next door neighbor, your Black next door neighbor, right? So these are some of the challenges, you know, that we have to view. Don't be afraid to say that's not funny or it's inappropriate when you're encountering somebody that's being racist in the workplace. Call them out. You know, I know that a lot of friends, you know, they say, well, people have told me that, you know, they have to have a job. They need a job. And oftentimes it's the head. It's never really at the bottom. You say, well, start at the bottom and work your way up. It's the head. You know, if I'm uncomfortable in the workplace, or I'm a student, or I am looking to be mentored and I'm uncomfortable in a situation, and the person that I have to go to is this 63-year-old white man who's probably never going to tell anybody else about my experience, it's almost like I'm moving in a circle, right? So at some point, there has to be a change in terms of who's mentoring, how they're doing so, and the people that are, you know, at the heads. Now, in terms of mentorship for me, this is the most important part of the message that I am yelling out, like that Meryl Streep meme. Like, you know, young Black talent comes from so many different backgrounds, and finding these young talent may require extra work, or looking beyond, you know, your usual reservoirs, wherever you look and you pull from usually, but it's not enough. You've got to really get out there and do the research. We've been open to exceptional young leaders and pulling them in and growing them along with us. And the payoff is digging deeper, and it'll be spectacular to truly drive our message. And our message is equity, and first and foremost, equity. And then from equity comes equality. Kimberly Ward, Kim founded the Black Interior Designers Network, who's my mentor and friend. And she mentored me. You know, she had no real reservations or insecurities about the value that I possessed, because she knew the value that I possessed. And even though I didn't know she was dying, she knew, right? And so I find so much beauty in being able to see that someone had so much love for the future that they would invest, right? And do so quietly, even in their death, to make sure that there are resources and that there is a future for young designers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for those on the call who did not have the honor of meeting Kimberly, she passed, I believe, in 2017, and she had been the founder of the network. And so it's really that legacy that's being continued today via you, Kia, via the Iconic Home, which is something everybody on this call is partnering with. Our digital show house is coming up with the Black Interior Designers Network soon. So yeah, it's a beautiful story, and it's a lot of responsibility too. So I think each of us has a superpower when it comes to promoting inclusivity within this industry. So as an editor, mine is probably being able to identify and promote designers of color using the platform that we have at AD. It's to actively seek out talent, you know, people of color. And it's also to help educate designers on what it takes to get published, that education/mentorship piece of it. So I'm wondering how we can all work together to identify what our strengths are and also to address and kind of combat our weaknesses. Kia, if you had to single out a single unique superpower, I know you have multiple ones, but if you had to pick, the one that really defines you as an interior designer, what would yours be?
Being able to find the team, right? If you've got the right team to execute, you can save the world. And for me, that is my superpower on all levels.
Yeah. And what would yours be? And Andrea too. I'd like to hear from you guys both about that.
Yeah, mine would be leading with influence, and that opportunity to give access and accessibility to our platform.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I think my superpower is my passion for products. I think it's just in what I live and breathe. And I mean, honestly, I think a weakness is just not having the opportunity to have this conversation that we're having today. And I think this is a great step forward. So that's my superpower and my weakness.
Absolutely. So I think we can probably all agree that as part of the industry that we're all in, we agree it's visual, it's creative, it's artistic. And I think to a certain degree, we pride ourselves on being very open. I know I do. I had to have a reckoning earlier this year. Like, I'm fairly open. And what happened forced me to look at bias, right? What's really happening? Take a really hard look. So we've seen throughout the last 5 months, or the last, I guess it's been almost 6 months now, that this is not always the case. The industry is not so open. It's not as open as I'd like to believe it is, right? So I'm wondering, Samara, maybe you can tell me. So when a person of color has been at that creative planning table, what changes? And maybe even more importantly to today's discussion, what's lost when those voices are not represented?
Yeah, I think that Kaya touched on a really great example with the Falameki Stool, right? Which is someone that's not at the table to give perspective, to challenge the approach, to help the idea go bigger, go further. But that lack of representation just means you have a much more narrowed view of whatever approach you're about to take to bear. And so I think that as we think about design and design that meets for all, that inclusivity and being able to say we've been so thoughtful about why we're celebrating this artisan or this product is just a critical mandate for us going forward.
Absolutely. We actually asked our audience, we have I think we have hundreds and hundreds of people on this call, and we asked for questions. So we'll get to at least 2 of them. So the first question is for Samara. It's, what positive effects have you seen so far in terms of company culture, sales numbers, or otherwise, since actively participating in diversifying initiatives like the Iconic Home? And again, for those on the call who are not familiar, the Iconic Home is a digital show house that we're all collaborating on. It's launching in mid-November. It is with the BIDN. We have obviously our fabulous sponsors, Crate & Barrel, CB2, and Architectural Digest. So for those who are not familiar, it's a purely digital show house, and it's launching next month. So this question again is wondering what positive effects you've seen since participating in initiatives like the show house and others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the combination, whether it be the showcase or the feeds we love, I see our associates so excited that we're participating in this conversation. They're really proud of how the brand is trying to show up in a very authentic way. The other positive is just the amount of connections I've been able to personally make to introduce or open the doors that Crate is available and open, and maybe they felt like it was a little too far removed from them and didn't have a way to make a connection. So by putting our face out there with the words has really helped in building those relationships. And then really, I think that a lot of our fruit will come from the labor that we're putting in right now. We still have a lot of work to do. Like, we don't want to downplay this, that a post somehow makes us absolved, not at all. We want to build a very rigorous roadmap to make this is a scalable program for us. It is tied to our strategic goals. But what I love is that the hint of just putting a little bit out there has started to really plant some nice seeds.
Absolutely. We have another question from our audience for Kia. So this one is, Do you have any thoughts about the longevity of the design community, brands, and media outlets' commitment to celebrating the contributions of Black interior designers? So any thoughts around longevity in terms of the support that we're now seeing?
Absolutely. I don't want to be that poetic person. Every time Samara says something, I come back with a quote like, yes, because you don't pick the fruit the same day you plant the seed. That's right. Like, yes, absolutely. You know, we are so elated to be partnering with Architectural Digest, and you, Katy, Amy Astley, the entire team. You know, Samara, your team, Crate and Barrel, you guys have been a pleasure to work with. And what we do look for is ease when it comes to making a difference, right? If we are going to set out on this journey together, you know, let's make it fun. Let's make it easy. Let's make it be what it should be, because it should not be one that is complicated at all. You know, when you know what you want to do and you know what you want to, who you want to do it for, you just do it, right? And so I'm totally a say less, do more type person. And so for me, I'm seeing you guys make it happen, and that's all that matters.
So we're gonna be closing soon, but I would love to ask each of you to share a single sentence. If you only had one sentence to define what an inclusive design industry would look like, what do you feel that it would be? How would you sum it up? And Samara, if you could share that with us.
So, you know, I would say without representation, you have limited the power of a future idea.
Andrea, we'd love to hear from you.
I would say it's an industry that really creates space and opportunity for those that are currently underrepresented, and creates a space where we look for inspiration and celebrate the diverse visions of what really makes for great design.
Mm-hmm. And Kia, how would you sum it up?
I would say there's a new chessboard on the table. The equity piece is paramount, and all the pieces that don't fit, we eliminate them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, with that, I want to say thank you to everyone here. I'm really honored to have had this conversation with you. I believe it's one that's going to continue both, through forums like this, but also behind the scenes where we can really, get our heads down and get to work. Thank you so much to Crate and Barrel, to CB2. You have been phenomenal partners for us, to the Black Interior Designers Network. We are really very, very grateful to partner with you on this. And it's been a joy today. So thank you all for being here. And to all the attendees, we really hope to see you again soon. Again, this is the first of a 3-part series. As soon as we have more details, you'll be hearing about it from me, I'm sure. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.